Good evening and welcome to our third talk during the Novena of St. Ignatius of Loyola. The first talk corresponded to the first week of the exercises of Ignatius. That is, reflection on sinfulness so as to dispose a person towards that reception of the gift of God's mercy. The second talk coincided with the second week of the exercises. That is, the person moved from the experience of mercy, seeking to respond, seeking to love God back by seeking to serve. And so for the third talk, as I'm sure you can anticipate, is that it corresponds to the third week of the exercises. And in the third week, Ignatius focuses on the Passion. And his focus on the Passion is very detailed. During different contemplations he lays out, he may say the retreat and praise over the material that may be one sentence or two sentences in the Gospel of Jesus going from the house of Annas to Caiaphas, or from Caiaphas to Herod, or back to Pontius Pilate. Whatever it is, he has it broken down very much so in great detail so that one may be fully immersed, I believe, in that experience of the Lord's Passion. Also with regard to Lord's Passion, he gives a unique instruction relative to the other 3 weeks of the exercises. And the instruction he gives in the third week is that the person in those contemplations is not so much to put oneself into the scene, that particular gospel scene, but rather the emphasis is to observe. That is, to observe what Christ is doing, what Christ is undergoing. Again, for me, I think this instruction is so that one may fully receive that gift of the Lord's Passion, that one may receive every morsel of the gift of the Lord's Passion. I remember reading once, many years ago, something from St. Anselm. And St. Anselm was writing on the death of the Lord, the crucifixion. And he spoke of the Lord's crucifixion as a substitution for the guilty party. This is sort of a substitutionary look at the crucifixion, at the Lord's death. St. Anselm said that because of sinfulness, be it from the first sin in the Garden of Eden to this very moment, that human beings have with God a debt that we owe God because of our infidelity, our sinfulness. However, because the debt is to God, then it is a debt beyond repayment for a human being or beings. It is, if you will, that God uses a currency that we can never, ever get our hands on. Therefore, that debt can never be repaid. Consequently, then, the Lord himself, the second person of the Holy Trinity, assumes that he is our substitute. And so that debt then is paid to the Father. We can look at the Passion and the crucifixion in several different ways in the history and tradition of the Catholic Church. St. Anselm's is just one of them. For me, the Passion, the crucifixion, I see it as being the way to understand it. I see it as God's perfect communication or God's perfect revelation of his love, of divine love. Recently, someone said to me that pretty well every person, they have that moment in their faith They have the moment that they can always go back to. That moment is like a well that never dries up. And so they can go back to that moment and be refilled. In my own faith, that moment in which I can always go back to, that moment is Good Friday. And in particular, it is the moment of his death, when Jesus is hanging dead on the cross. That is the moment I can always go back to and be filled. Because that moment of his death on the cross is again that moment in my own faith of God's perfect revelation, God's eternal revelation of his eternal love. I think of the gospel in many ways like the following. I imagine being 2,000 years ago when Jesus walked the earth. And I can imagine me being in a crowd. And in that crowd, I'm somewhat distant from him, but I'm close enough that I can hear him. And so then I hear him speak, teach, preach. And in hearing him, I imagine that when he is finished, he looks around the crowd, trying to make eye contact with me. And when he makes eye contact with me, it's as if he's asking me the question, what did I think? And in response, just through our eye contact, I communicate to him that these words he has spoken are words I have never heard the like of before. They are amazing, they are outstanding. And yet I must confess that even though they are amazing and outstanding, I still don't get it. And so then there is a nod of determination. He goes and he tries something else. Maybe he goes and he cleanses the leper, or he gives sight to the man born blind. And when he is finished in the crowd, he looks for me. But I'm not at the front of the crowd, but I'm not as far back as I used to be. Maybe now I'm sort of closer to the middle. And as he looks around and we make eye contact again with his eyes, he asks me, what did I think? And with my eyes, I communicate back that this is even more amazing than those words you spoke, or these actions put flesh now on those words that you had spoken earlier. For never has anyone been born blind, have their sight given to them. And even though it is most incredible, with my eyes I say to him that I confess again that even though it's incredible, I still don't get it. And so then there's a nod of determination. He will go and he will try something else. And so maybe it is the Lord calming the sea and the winds, telling them, commanding them to be still, to be quiet. And then when he commands the wind and the sea to be still in the boat, he looks for me. And I'm no longer just in the middle, I'm a little closer, but still not at the front. But he is drawing me to him. And then with his eyes, he asks me, what did I think? And now I say to him, Lord, who can command the wind to be still, or the seas to be gentle? there is only one who can do such a thing. And the only one who can do such a thing is the one who's created the wind, who has created the seas. It is only the Creator, it is only you. And even though I know the meaning of the words I am saying, I still don't fully get it. And so, with an odd determination, he goes and he tries something else. And for me, that last thing he tries, having tried everything else, is the cross. And after he breathes his last and his head sinks, he can no longer make eye contact with me. But as I look upon him dead of life, I say to him, Lord, I must confess that now and only now do I understand. Only now do I understand who I am for you. That I am not just a frustrating or failing project. I'm not just a constant source of disappointment for you. But you have fulfilled what we have heard in the Psalms of the Old Testament, that I am the apple of your eye. Because when I see you hanging lifelessly, I understand that you have emptied yourself of everything. That the author of life has emptied himself even of life. So that you can understand. Understand the infinite. Understand the eternal love of God for each person. That he would give everything, even his life. And so this is that source that I can always go back to. And for each of us, that source is different. But the passion for me in the crucifixion is not about paying an eternal debt with heavenly currency, but rather the passion and the crucifixion is about the revelation of the Father's love, the unstoppable revelation of the Father's love. The unstoppable revelation of the Father's personal love, revealed to us in Jesus Christ, his only begotten Son. And so, it's not for me about a debt. It's about a gift. And that word does not do it justice. It is about a gift of unstoppable eternal love. That is personal. That is all-knowing. He knows who we are. He knows who I am. He knows who you are. And we are loved deeply because Jesus of Nazareth, born in Bethlehem, was crucified and died in Jerusalem. And so Ignatius wanted us just to observe, not to miss a moment, not to miss a morsel, because what we are receiving is the most precious thing in the world. It's the most tender thing in the world. It's the eternal love of God for me and for you. God bless and take care.